Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I thought I'd start a new series about 10 things I've learned, so throughout life, different things I've learned from doing different things and living and being in different places. This video will be about 10 things I learned while I lived in China. So between, I'm really bad at dates, basically a year after we graduated university, we decided to move to China. By we, I mean me and my boyfriend Lee. So when anyone asks me what it was like living in China, coming from the UK, I always say it depended on the day. So on a good day, it was incredible. And on a bad day, it was terrible. And quite the poet, I know. But what I mean by that is that if you were having a good day, everything was exciting. You'd be having an adventure, everything was new, and you know, you'd be having fun. But then on a bad day, a lot of things could potentially go wrong, as you can imagine, with language differences and with a massive kind of culture difference as well. So we spent 6 months living in a place called Hojie, which was in Dongguan, which is Guangdong province. So lots of dongs and guangs. But yeah, so we were there for 6 months, and then we came home for a month and then moved back out to Beijing, and we were there for about a year and a bit. So in total we spent about 2 years more or less living in China. So I thought I'd share with you some thoughts and feelings about my experiences there, and yeah, let's get straight into it. So the first thing, which might seem really obvious, but actually it wasn't until I got there, was I can probably genuinely say it was the first time I realised how white I was. And by that I mean coming from North Wales, where in my high school there was, I think, one Chinese girl, maybe a few people who were Pakistani British. I mean, we weren't exposed to that many different cultures. And I mean, even growing up with my parents always telling me about different cultures around the world, both of them, you know, well-travelled and had lived in massive multicultural cities. I also went to university in Manchester, and obviously Manchester is a very large multicultural city. But I never was kind of conscious of any privilege. I mean, I'm sure it went on for definite, but I mean in terms of, you know, being conscious of it. It wasn't until I went to China that I realised how kind of my whiteness could be used as a way of, I don't know, making out I was somehow more special than other people, which was a bit uncomfortable. So to give you some examples, so I can kind of make myself a bit clearer. One time my head teacher at the school I was working in at the time, it was quite kind of cool and a sign of status to have English teachers who were white. And I remember one time there was this big barbecue for like the start of the school year, and we were introduced to the other head teachers in the schools in the area, some of which also had teachers in their school who were English, some of them who didn't. By English I mean a native English speaker, sorry, not just from England. And honestly, we were paraded around like prizes. It was really strange, and because it was seen to be a status symbol of how good your school was to have a native English teacher, and especially a white one. I mean, I'd always overhear the fact that because we were white we were somehow better, and it was really strange. Me and Lee used to have a competition about how many people would ask us for pictures, because no joke, we have photo albums of people who would just say, can I have a picture? And it was because we were white and different to what a lot of people were used to, and that was really strange. I mean, it was funny. We used to laugh and joke about, you know, oh, this person wanted my picture but not yours, and it was like a running kind of funny joke between us. But I was never kind of conscious of that before, so in terms of that, that was kind of a bit of an eye-opener for me. Okay, the second thing I definitely learned was how age really is just a number. So it's incredible, like the elderly population in China are amazingly active. So outside our apartment block at 7 o'clock every single morning there'd be a siren, and no joke, about 50 or 60 old women and some old men, but majority creating words, the majority of them were women, would do a big aerobics workout. And I hope I can find the clip, but I have a clip of looking out of my window and seeing at 7 o'clock in the morning this kind of energetic dance music appearing out of nowhere. And these women must have been, I'd say the youngest was probably 70 something, right up until 90, doing all of these exercises, and it was incredible. You know, you could go into any of the major parks and see a lot of old people practicing Tai Chi or yoga. One time we saw a woman sword fighting, And it was only until we kind of saw the front of her face that we realised she must have been about 75, 76. And it was amazing to see that obviously it's encouraged to be still active and healthy at that age, and obviously it's brilliant. And now I can say I've seen some really cool badass old ladies sword fighting. Okay, one of the funnier sides definitely of living in China was the Chinglish. And if you don't know, Chinglish is Chinese and English put together. So often there'd be a lot of really hilarious signs where either somebody had not translated it very well, or there was maybe a spelling mistake that meant it was a slightly different word than the intention would have been, and it was always hilarious. So I have lots of different examples of funny Chinglish, and it was definitely a highlight going around looking at all of the signs. Another major thing I learned was not to judge a restaurant just by how it looks. I mean, I've honestly had some of the best food I've ever tried in my life in the dingiest of places. So there was this street market when we lived in Hozhou in southern China, where it was outside. I mean, there was no sinks, nobody could like wash their hands. I mean, like the hygiene was probably not great, but the food was incredible, and for about £1 you could eat like a king. Other restaurants would be kind of maybe holes in the wall where you could go get noodles or incredible dishes that were really cheap and really tasty. But to look at them, maybe you'd think, oh, I don't know if that place is going to have good food. So it definitely taught me not to judge a restaurant solely on how it looks. Another thing related to food would definitely be to push myself out of my comfort zone. So I learned a lot, I mean, not just in food, with life in general, to try something new and to be adventurous. And lots of street markets, and even in some places where, you know, the menus would be in Chinese characters, not in pinyin, so I wouldn't be able to read and understand what was on the menu. So you'd literally have to point at something, order it, and hope for the best. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it did not. Linked into food and times when things maybe didn't go to plan would be definitely that you don't know discomfort like it until you have diarrhea and a squat toilet in about 38-degree heat. Not a pleasant experience, not one I'd like to repeat again, funnily enough. Yeah, that taught me a lot about my strength of character, having an awful stomach virus and a squat toilet in very hot weather, and that's probably all the details I'm going to go into for that. Another big life lesson I learned really was how to be confident and stick to my guns. So, I mean, in a different country, sometimes even in a different place you're not used to, like a different city, or, you know, you're not maybe sure of the way things work. And obviously, again, as I said, China's such a different culture. Often there are situations where maybe we could be taken advantage of, whether that be through work, or whether that be through taxi drivers trying to make us pay more than the trip should be, just because of the fact he thought we were tourists. And it taught me a lot about how to be confident and really stick to my guns, and whether that meant having to raise my voice or having to maybe put myself in an uncomfortable situation. It meant that it really increased my confidence, because you were stuck in situations where you had no other choice. For example, one time we were in a taxi and we'd asked for the price before. He told us it would be kind of the equivalent of a couple of pounds, and then he wouldn't let us out of the taxi until we gave him about £50. And I refused to, and it got to the point where Lee and even my friends were like, no, like, let's just pay, let's get out, I don't want to be, I just want this to be over with. But I just refused, and eventually we didn't pay the amount he was asking. I mean, obviously with that you've got to be careful of your safety and everything, but I judged the situation that he was just a bit of a con man, and yeah, we got out fine. And that also obviously extends to markets. It taught me a lot about how to negotiate. So if you've never been to a Chinese market before, one, you should do, because they have some of the most incredible things ever. You could get anything you wanted. I remember seeing dresses that were online in Topshop at the time, but in these markets for a fraction of the price, and it was amazing. But again, with that, you had the whole rigmarole of negotiating. I mean, that was a massive stress at times, I must say. You just wanted to buy something and pay and not really bother, but it taught me a lot about negotiating, and in the end it was all good fun. I mean, I'd say 90% of the people who wanted to sell you something were good-spirited and would want to negotiate with you, and, you know, it would be a good experience. But there was that 10% which would be quite stressful. One massive thing living in China taught me as well was how to be, I wouldn't say how to be adventurous, because I've always been quite adventurous, but how to maybe take advantage of new opportunities, and how to kind of seize the day, I guess, because there were so many different times where because the rules are so different there and the kind of everyday norms are different, getting into a tuk-tuk and things like that, where maybe you'd think, okay, this is a 6-lane motorway and I'm on a tuk-tuk here with a man driving on a little bicycle, and if any car crashes into us, we're screwed. Looking back, you know, probably quite dangerous, but really good fun. Another massive thing I learned while living in China was definitely how to be resourceful and how to adapt. So one time we were on our way in Golden Week. Golden Week's like a week off they have, kind of like a bank holiday week, I guess, in the UK, which is very, very popular for travel. And we had decided to go visit Shanghai, and we got to the airport and we discovered that our flight had been cancelled because at the time there was a massive storm or something, and all the flights were cancelled. So we were sat in the airport and they said to us, okay, we can transfer the flight to another flight if you want. Where do you want to go? So we had about an hour until the next flight could leave. We decided, okay, let's go to Chengdu, which is the place famous for the pandas. So we decided last minute to go there. We were in the airport with limited internet access, trying to find accommodation, trying to kind of cancel our accommodation in Shanghai. And I think we had about 30 minutes in total before this flight to turn everything around and get on the plane. So it was quite a last minute decision, but again, it taught me a lot about how to be resourceful and how to maybe turn what was essentially a disappointing situation, and it could have been a bit of a disaster, into something positive. It also taught me a lot about how I can react quite well when I'm pushed out of my comfort zone. So for example, one time when we were traveling from Beijing to Guangdong, so down south, we were on a train which took 29 hours. And I'm not talking, you know, beautiful Orient Express carriages here. We were in the cheapest economy class in a tiny, the room was not much wider than maybe 2 toilet cubicles pushed together with 6 bunk beds. And it was very crowded, people were smoking, and I really hate smoking, so it was hard to kind of breathe. And it was really cramped and not necessarily great. So yeah, so we made the best of it, and actually we were on the train, it went over 2 nights. And in the end we met a group of people, and we were playing cards with them and drinking with them, and we ended up having a really good time. So it just goes to show that sometimes if something looks like it's not going to be great, you know, something good can come out of it. Very important relating to drinking. It made me realise that, because basically in China the kind of drinking rule is that if you finish your glass of drink, someone's always going to top it up. So if you've had enough, you're meant to leave a little bit left in the glass or put your hand on top. And yeah, we didn't know that for quite a while, so that ended up in a few messy nights. In Chinese, the way to say cheers is a ganbei, which basically means dry glass, so drink it until it's gone. And we had a big dinner one time with a few head teachers from the area and from our school, where Lee got very, very drunk on baijiu, and baijiu is essentially death liquor. It's this white wine spirit that is honestly really awful. And yeah, I probably wouldn't go drinking that again, but yeah, it definitely taught us to maybe look up the drinking norms before you start filling up your glass. And the last thing I learned was about how amazing and varied, I mean, China's such a huge country, that, you know, there's so many places you can see, and if you've never visited China, I really recommend it. I mean, you really do have everything. You've got the amazing cityscapes, you have gorgeous fairy tale style mountains, rivers, the Great Wall. I mean, there's so much to see. That it just made me realise, I mean, it was the first place I went to out of Europe, so it made me realise how massive the world is and how many places there are to see. So sorry, my camera battery died and now the lighting's changed, but we'll just have to continue. But yeah, so it made me realise how many places there were, especially off the beaten track, that you could go and explore and see some really amazing things. The last thing I learned, I guess I would say, was that no matter what the language differences were, the majority of people were always so friendly. So even though you'd have a situation where maybe neither of you understood the other, just using gestures or body language and being kind and helpful and, you know, at the beginning kind of pointing for things essentially, you could still see that kindness between two people that, you know, were from very different backgrounds, very different countries, different languages, different everything, but that, you know, you could really find kind of kindness coming across from two different people, and that was really nice. It just made me realise, not that I didn't already know, but I mean, it kind of cemented the fact that no matter where you come from, really, we are all just the same. Underneath it all were just a big old bag of bones. So yeah, I think I'll leave it on that note. Oh, but bonus Jonas, actually, I also discovered I was allergic to mosquito bites. So that was very unpleasant, as you can imagine. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video and maybe learned something new about a place that you have been to or haven't been to. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever been to China, or if you're from China, or if you're Chinese. And if you have never been, if you'd like to go, or which part you'd like to see. I definitely think everyone should go there at least once in their life, because there's so much to see and the food is just out of this world. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon in my next video. Bye. What did you learn living in China?
Nothing.
Nothing.